Good evening. How's it going? Hopefully pretty well. I'm going to give a quick introduction, but if you haven't yet or are just walking in just like 1 minute, we're going to pull up the results of this little QR code survey. If you have your phone handy, it's not like you have to do this to get credit or something. Oh, it's TTUSD guest, but at this point, if you're not on the Wi-Fi, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Thank you guys for showing up tonight. So my name is Jeff Ream. I'm the even year graduating class counselor. So that's this year's current sophomores and seniors. And then standing next to me is Miss Jennifer Jango-Cohen, who is the odd year graduating class counselor. And so she has our current freshmen and juniors. So tonight, what we're going to be spending some time doing is really introducing the concept of college admissions. Okay, this presentation is actually kind of a challenging one to actually prepare and give, because everybody, there's probably some seniors in here maybe, there's some juniors, there's some freshmen, there's some sophomores, and everyone is kind of in a little bit of a different place in this journey. So we're going to be kind of starting from scratch to some degree, and hitting kind of the zoomed out Google Maps look, the 30,000 foot view of how 4-year college admissions functions, okay? And so we know that we will probably not hit every item. We cannot do that in about an hour. We definitely will not answer all the questions. Definitely can't do that in 2 years. But we will do our best to kind of give you a bigger picture so you have some language, some terminology, some time frames to help you understand a rather confusing process that happens. So let's take a look. We'll see if this works. Maybe. If not, we'll skip it. All right, so we got a couple 5th, 9th graders, we got a couple 10th graders, a couple 11th graders, and no seniors, which is not surprising. They're kind of through much of this process right now. So they're not necessarily, if they haven't learned it yet, it's not too late, but every day is getting later. So let's see what we got next. So from your current understanding, people didn't skip to the next question, I guess. Okay, if you have questions, I will pull this up after and I will actually pull questions. So if you still have that little QR code questionnaire up, at the bottom there's a little arrow to go to the next question. We're gonna skip through this now, but I might pull this up later, or I'll look at it later when I update some other information that we'll send out following our time together. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Jango-Cohen. I'm going to give you this one. And please excuse our ghost-ridden lights. And then we will dive in.
Okay, perfect. Well, yes, it's nice to see people from all grade levels, mostly, here today. The college planning process really does start from freshman year onward. There's so much foundational preparation you can do as freshmen, sophomores, and then juniors. So today we are going to cover a lot of the key reminders and focus points so that you can feel prepared for your high school career. Okay, so we're going to start with the freshman year. This is where students are laying the groundwork for all of their academic and extracurricular endeavors. So students really do want to be focused on building their study habits and learning their organizational strategies that work for them. We are recommending that all students build in their routine of attending RTI. This is our extra help session on Wednesday and Thursdays. Students are able to utilize this time in order to study for tests, ask questions of teachers, and really just practice that self-advocacy that can be really useful to them as they continue on throughout high school. Some of these relationships that students are building as freshmen are going to go with them throughout their 4 years, as we have teachers teaching many different grade levels from regular to AP. Additionally, there are a lot of activities, new clubs and sports that students can get involved in as freshmen. And so we are encouraging students to be open-minded and just give
new things a try. Ultimately, we want students to find a few of their most favorite activities to really engage deeply with and pursue over the course of their high school career. So the more they try out, the more likely it is that they will find something they really love. And I'm talking a little slower just so that we can have interpretation follow along with me. So sophomore year is now the time for students to really focus in on what were those study strategies that worked for them and to continue building upon them. If they were successful and felt good about their freshman year, then they want to just continue onward along that line. If freshman year was challenging, that is okay. We really want to connect with students and help them to feel that they can move forward and continue with an upward trajectory for their academic success. And this is actually a really positive thing to show on your college transcript. So if colleges are seeing that students are continuously improving, this is great, and it shows resilience and the fact that students can adjust and continue learning. Sophomore year is also the first year where students are able to take an AP class. So we do offer AP Human Geography to all students, and this is the alternative option to world history. So students, if they have an interest in history or they're motivated with reading and writing, this could be a good fit for them. Some students are also able to enroll in AP Spanish. And this is if they had taken Spanish 3 as freshmen. So these classes are really useful because they help to boost their GPA. The AP classes are weighted. So yeah, if a student can take this on, we recommend it. Also, sophomores are now able to start practicing for their standardized test experience. And so we do offer the PSAT here at the high school in October. And so at this point, we ran it last month and we had pretty good turnout. It's really low stakes because the scores are not being sent to colleges. And so students can just feel no pressure and just really get a feel for what this experience is like for them. And then moving on to activities, hopefully students did discover an activity or sport that they really enjoyed. And at this point, they can continue to engage with it and maybe even take on some more leadership opportunities within this. So we really encourage that if possible. Students also, if they are to further explore this activity with either volunteer work or with summer jobs, any way to show a consistent engagement in a theme, this is really positive for colleges as it shows a passion and is just a really good strategy to set yourself apart. And then as of now, students are hopefully starting to learn more about themselves, what their values are, the things they care about. And ultimately, we hope that knowing yourself can help a student to identify what type of colleges they will be interested in their future. Another cool idea is if you're on your travels and you happen to be near a college campus, why not just take a casual walk around and get a feel for what a college setting is like. They're so different, rather the city life or the rural settings. It's a good idea for students to just get that feel and start to imagine themselves and how that could be if they were to attend there. All right, so junior year, this is a pretty critical year in the college preparation process. Students are actually starting to take steps towards their admission at this point. So now juniors are able to take the most rigorous coursework available to them in any year. They can take a wide range of AP classes and college classes. We do want to make sure students are balancing their course load, however, because if a student takes too many APs and feels overwhelmed, this is obviously not the ideal situation. We care about their mental health, and ultimately their transcript will look their absolute best if they have a good balance and they're able to put 100% into all of their classes. Now the PSAT is available as well for juniors, but juniors are now in the running for the National Merit Recognition. This is a nationwide recognition that the College Board puts out. And we do sometimes have people who earn national merit recognitions due to the fact that their PSAT scores are high. And so this is a really nice resume builder that students can earn if they do really well on the PSAT. Additionally, it is now a really good time to be doing a little bit more in-depth research for college planning. So we encourage students to attend college fairs and different events. We are putting out different field trips throughout the year that we are inviting students to attend as well. And any chance a student can, start to find their favorite schools and add them to their college lists so that they can begin to determine what preparation they will need to take on in the spring. Oh, and again, back to the PSAT. So one really nice thing about taking the PSAT as a junior, even though your scores are not being sent, you can review your score report, and then you can determine what you might want to focus on when you take the actual exam in March. We offer the SAT here at the school in March, and we'll put that out in January for you. But if students do look at their score report and pick different subjects to focus on to study, it can really boost their scores. If a student does have a pretty comprehensive list by, the winter and, late winter, they can also determine how much emphasis they would like to put on the SAT, how much studying will be required for them. If many of their schools will be requiring this exam, then they might want to really prepare and make sure they put their best foot forward for taking it. Additionally, once a student does have that list drafted, they are able to make more decisions about which teachers they may need to speak with about writing a recommendation for them. So Mr. Ream will speak more about recommendations a little bit later, but just briefly, you want to make sure if your college has any requirements for your major. So if they do need a science teacher specifically for an engineering major, or anything along those lines, you want to make sure you do ask the right people. And you want to be asking teachers who you have a good relationship with and can speak to your character and not just your grade. And then there are going to be different deadlines for colleges related to financial aid and priority deadlines for this. So if you do have that list pretty well organized by the spring, you can start to prepare over the summer which applications you'll want to focus on first in order to meet these deadlines. And again, college essays will be probably part of these applications, and you can begin working on them as soon as you find out which schools you plan to apply to, because generally the essays do not change. So the common application has 7 options for essays, and these don't change. You can prepare for it and think about these things early on, even, the end of your sophomore year. If something very profound happens to you, you could write about that. Okay, so yeah, the end of junior year kind of then melts into senior year, because the summer is a really big time for graduating juniors going into senior year. The common application is the application where many private or out-of-state schools are listed, and students can apply through this common application. It opens August 1st. So students are able to work on their common application over their summer before senior year. The UC application also opens August 1st. So students, if they do have some time available over the summer, they are able to really get a head start in filling out their activities section and working on essays to submit. Additionally, yeah, we are recommending about 6 to 12 schools for your college list. This can differ depending on your specific circumstance, but you definitely want a couple of safety schools in there where your GPA is higher than the average. The majority should be target schools where you are at that average range of admittance. And then for some competitive schools, they will be reaches for everyone just because they are so competitive to get into. So you do want that balanced list. October 1st is when the financial aid applications will open up for the FAFSA and for the California DREAM Act. We are hosting a financial aid night next month. And you do want to be mindful because your college applications may have their specific deadlines that are tied to financial aid. And so while you may, it is a rolling application for completing the FAFSA and California DREAM Act, but you may want to make sure you complete it in time for your college deadline. We are holding that in December, but generally as long as you have your application done by early January, you should be okay in most circumstances. And then November 1st through 15th, that's when all of the early action, early decision deadlines tend to fall on. So seniors right now, they are already past that and maybe have submitted their applications. The UC and CSU applications will all be due on November 30th. So that's coming up soon. So for many students, their application process ends before December. So it is pretty early on in senior year. And then there will be many schools that do offer regular decision timelines. And this is oftentimes between December, and it can even go up until February as well. And then students do get that little period of time in between, a few months where they're done with their applications and they're waiting for their acceptance letters. And then depending on how early they applied, come February or towards April, they will be getting those acceptance letters and their financial aid packages so that students can compare and determine what will be the best option for them. We recommend students go on their last minute tours and connect with colleges however they can during that time to help them make their decisions. Because come May 1st, this is National College Decision Day, and students are committing to a school at this point and do have to submit their deposit. Oh, and yes, the most important thing, seniors really do have to make sure that they keep their grades up because there have been circumstances where a senior's acceptance letter has been rescinded if they dropped significantly during their senior year. So really continue to stay motivated and know that your grades do matter when we send your final transcript in May. Okay, so this is a study about the importance of the different academic factors in college acceptance. And so overwhelmingly from this survey, it was determined that grades and GPA really are the most important factor that colleges are looking at when it comes to their decision making. Keep in mind as well that it's not just grades, but it's also the classes that a student took. So they are looking specifically at that GPA and those grades related to the core academic subjects. So that's the math, your science, social studies, and English classes. So of course you want to try your best in all your classes, but those are the ones where colleges are going to be putting the most weight on when they're looking and recalculating your GPA on their standards. And then the strength of curriculum is very important as well. So that is why we encourage students to take AP classes or college level classes if they are able to, because they do hold more weight and colleges will feel as though students are more prepared for college if they have already shown success in these high-level classes. And interestingly, the class rank factor is much less important than it used to be. Colleges aren't really using that anymore. We don't rank at North Tahoe High School at all. So if a student does, see that question on their college application, they just will indicate that our school does not rank and it will not be held against them. Okay, and so as I mentioned, for junior year timeline, these are a lot of the other factors that students have to prepare in order to complete their applications for college. So extracurricular activities are a large factor in a student's application. And so this is why we do encourage students to really try different things and to find their interests, find their passions, and then really explore them in many different ways. This can be one of the defining features of a student's application that sets them apart from their data points on their transcript. It's more important, so I know students have to complete their community service hours and just earn those hours somehow, but we really try to encourage that students keep with their theme of interest and don't just take, a bunch of random opportunities that aren't connected to each other. I mean, of course, if you need your hours, do that, but the best way to do it is to be intentional and to choose things that are related to your ultimate goals in life. And then, as I mentioned earlier, essays are going to be an important component. Students should, I would like for students to be looking at their essays early on to see, what the questions are, because these are not just questions that you know the answer to right away and you just write them down. These are really deep reflective questions that have to do with your growth and your defining experiences over the course of your life. And so it takes time, and students can ponder these questions and think about them to really choose the topic that might be the piece that makes the difference in their application, so that they are not looking just like everyone else. And then again, letter of recommendation, be aware of that, be aware of which teachers you will need to ask, and what you need to do in order to give them the most information so they can write the best recommendation possible. We do have something called a senior profile, and this is something that I will share with juniors later this year. This is a document that has many reflective questions that students can fill out, and it's like their ticket to ask for a recommendation. And the nice thing about this senior profile is that it is possibly utilized multiple times. So a student could use it for maybe supplemental questions on their applications, and it could trigger different thoughts they have for their larger essays. So we do hope that this is a useful tool for them for many purposes. There is something you may have heard called demonstrated interest. So this is something that is occasionally important for maybe some smaller colleges. Demonstrated interest is how often a student has interacted with a campus. So whether that means going on a formal visit or having back and forth with admissions representatives through emails, going to different events that the college has held. Some colleges will track this, and the more engagement a student has had with a school, this could mean to them that a student has more intention of attending if they are to be accepted. So yeah, maybe this could be a question you ask when you are discussing admission with admissions representatives to see if this is a factor for them. It's also important to not disregard your work and any family responsibilities that students have participated in over the course of their time in high school. This can be really important to include in the activities section, and can really speak to a student's character and the different things they have gone through. So be sure to include this on the activities portion of applications. And then in Tahoe, we have so many talented students. We have so many people engaged in special pursuits. And so if you do have one of those special talents or you've received recognitions in our country for your athletics or any other activities, of course, this is huge, and we definitely encourage you to highlight this in your applications as well. Okay, so people, I'm sure, have heard of the A through G requirements. We really do talk about A through G a lot in all of our meetings and try to help people to know what these are so that they can be prepared. A through G requirements are the courses that are required to be eligible to apply to the UCs and the CSU campuses. And we do align pretty similarly in our graduation requirements for A through G. The main differences are just that students do need to make sure they take 2 years of the same world language, so focus on that. And they do need a year of fine art, so music or art class. And students also need to earn a C or higher for these classes to count. So if you have questions about this, we always work with students on remediation if they do need to make up a D or an F in these classes. So it is possible, and we encourage you to speak to us if you have questions about that. And then aside from the A through G requirements, there is a GPA requirement for admission as well. So there is a 3.0 minimum GPA requirement to be eligible to apply to the UC campuses, and 2.5 minimum GPA for the CSU campuses. You may have heard that there is a new law being put into place that is allowing for direct admission to 16 of the CSU campuses if students earned a 2.5 GPA or higher. This is for our current rising juniors, so class of 2027. We are still learning all the nuts and bolts about this, and we are excited about it, and we'll do everything we can to support students so that they can earn those admissions letters. But keep in mind, there probably are going to be some limitations when it comes to popular majors or potentially popular campuses as it starts to unroll. So continue to try your best and just work hard so that you can have the most competitive GPA possible for this program. All right, so I will now turn the second half of the presentation over to Mr. Ream.
Awesome. I get the fun slide, testing. So testing is ever-changing, seemingly environment that colleges continue to add more acronyms and formats and requirements as each year goes by. So anytime we talk about testing or college admissions in general, just know we don't control the factors. The colleges tell us what they want. And so things are always subject to kind of change as years go by. So if you're a freshman, come your senior year, you might want to come back 4-year colleges in the United States. And so that's also why it's kind of challenging is how do we pick? But the vast majority of them fall into a category what they call test optional. Okay, test optional means that you get the choice as a student to determine how this exam that you take on one day for 3 hours of your life will represent you in a big factor of your next steps. And so generally speaking, that's good in my opinion. I think that's a positive trait of a school for them to give you the opportunity to make a determination if they feel it's important or not. So the CSUs and the UC systems are test-free, meaning they will not take that. If you have a perfect SAT score, you can pat yourself on the back, but it's not going to help you in the CSU or UC world. Okay, so it's not going to be something that we can submit. They can use it for academic placement in terms of classes, but there's many, many ways of meeting those requirements. But for admissions, they don't actually look at anything. Now, if you had a perfect SAT score, that would be a circumstance when you probably would choose not to be test optional, then you would choose to be, I'm submitting that thing. Okay, and so that's something that you want to keep in mind.
And as Ms. Django Cohen mentioned, that research component is going to be an important element as well. Okay, so understanding as you're doing your research, this is a kind of important data point to kind of start looking into. Finding out which schools are test optional, which are not, which are required, because there are a few that are kind of circling back to the good old days of, requiring students to submit a test. And there are actually like probably 5 or 6 different acronyms for how schools want or need testing. And so if you have any questions as you're looking at tests, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. It's an important part of the process, but it's also, in the same note, not important, right? If you're like, your student is like, I hate tests, like they are the worst thing in the world. If I could do anything to get out of testing, I will. And I don't do my best on tests, I know that about myself. It might be something that you as a family, you have that discussion and you just realize like, I'm probably not gonna represent myself the best on an SAT. Maybe it's not really super important for us as a family or my process, and we ditch it, okay? But that's an important kind of conversation to start thinking about. But generally speaking, there's kind of some typical assumptions related to testing and whether I should submit or not. So generally speaking, you can find test scores on college websites, and they're usually broken down into percentiles or quartiles, and so you can see where the different score bands land in relation to maybe what your test score looks like. So if your test score is falling in the 75th percentile, which means your score is higher than the 75% of the other applicants who get admitted, generally speaking, it'd be probably maybe helpful. Okay, if it's in the 25th percentile, generally speaking, it's probably not going to be as helpful. Okay, so that's one of the key areas that we look at when we talk about whether it's a good idea to submit or not. Okay, so keep that in mind. The other element about testing that's just as important is this area here about merit scholarships. Some schools use test scores as a factor in evaluating students for potentially merit-based scholarships, so that could be another thing to kind of research as you're kind of going through developing your college list. I'm not going to talk too long about letters of recommendation. Essentially, to build on what Ms. Django Cohen had talked about, 2 points I want to kind of make. Number one is I think it's important to really think about not necessarily who gave you the best grade. Okay, it's not about who gave you the A, or it might be more important to have someone express your growth. Okay, or your engagement in some other activity that maybe isn't reflected on a grade during class. Okay, that personal connection is an underappreciated element of how schools really review information about this. The other piece is for when we're talking about the application cycles for four-year colleges, you'll see on the application it'll list required or optional. Okay, so schools will indicate how many letters they need or how many letters you could potentially submit. The general rule is if it's a required letter, students should be looking for some sort of academic instructor. Okay, it doesn't have to be necessarily your English teacher. It could be a band teacher. It could be a PE teacher. Okay, you have to think about what they might write about you. However, the optional ones could extend beyond that. Okay, I typically don't encourage coaches or bosses or things like that to be part of your required letter list. But if you have optional opportunities and you feel like someone out in the community that you volunteered with or you worked consistently for can speak well about you, your character, your history, that might be a really good letter to potentially submit as an optional letter in that list. We also, as counselors, typically will have to write a good number of letters. Our letters function fairly differently than a teacher recommendation. Theirs are a little bit more narrative in terms of kind of like how they experience you in class, what you're like as a learner. Our counselor recommendations are a little bit more bigger picture. We talk about generally how you engage in the school culture, what are the things that you're involved in, what's your curriculum like, have there been any challenges or great achievements that we like to pull out. So it's less of a kind of a day-to-day thing and more of a big picture holistic thing. But every year, probably for about 80% of the applicants, we write letters. So we will also be part of that group of people that will expect that senior profile document, which we will make sure that students have access to. And it's always accessible on our website, but in the junior year is a big year when we actually like make sure they see it. So how do we get some strong recommendations? Again, that relationship is super important. So if you're the quiet student sitting in the back of the room, now is a great time to kind of like, maybe not change and be the class clown, but maybe start thinking like, hey, you know, they need to know me. They need to know who I am. And that means that you can do that in your own special way, but it should be something that you think about in relation to how you engage with the adults around you. Okay, and that's your teachers, that's your counselors, that's your principals, it's our lunchroom staff, it's our custodians, right? Sometimes some of the best letters I've read came from a custodian, okay? Because they talked about how out of the way the student went to make sure that the hallways were kept clean and help the students make sure that they were being responsible and not just trashing stuff to, you know, kind of leave sometimes the hidden folks that work in school to be responsible for that. And that showed a really deep level of leadership. The other piece is that no person on campus is required to write a letter of recommendation. Okay, this is a thing that teachers especially, we have the privilege of being able to shut our doors when we need to be able to get some of these things done. Teachers can't just like cancel class to write letters of recommendation. Much of their letter writing happens after school. It happens at home, happens in the evening. Okay, and so teachers are not required, neither are we. It's a privilege for us to do so, but that also means like it's a privilege that you should be asking for and approaching it the right way. And that also, again, goes back to that relationship component. And then following up, that's it. And we will tell students about this, just so you know. I know there's a few of you in here, but the thank you is one of the bigger pieces. Most teachers have a smile file or something that when you have a hard day, you can go look at about a letter from a kid who was kind of a brat in ninth grade, and maybe you had him again as a senior, and they're all of a sudden this like magical person that's going to go fix the world, which happens more often than not, by the way. That growing up thing is really helpful, okay? But it's something that like the thank yous, and it can just be a simple card or just a handshake, like we appreciate you taking time. That goes a long way. The college essays are something that are actually probably one of the harder parts of the application cycle. The completing of applications is really kind of drudgery, to be honest. It's a little bit tedious, it's a little bit detailed, but it's actually not really all that hard to fill in your name, fill in your classes and things like that. The areas that actually take a lot of kind of like the brain work and effort are the creative elements, the stuff that you have to put on pen and paper and pour your heart out into, and probably spend multiple times reviewing if you're doing it well to really benefit your application. And the essay is actually what I consider in the job interview. Most of us have done a job interview. In the job interview world, your application is the resume. It's what opens the door. Your essays are your interview. It's what seals the deal. Okay, and so that's the piece that when we're talking about spending time on essays and really making this, like this is not a 2-week process when done well. Okay, you might finish an essay, you might refine an essay, but the best essays are started weeks, months, even years in advance. Okay, and it's not maybe active writing, maybe it's thinking and mulling things over and really kind of diving into that piece. The other piece that sometimes comes up when I'm reviewing, I review a lot of essays, and the thing that I notice quite a bit is, and this is every English department, every college class teaches English and writing kind of a little different than what the English writing is for college essays. Okay, we kind of tell you introduction, body, conclusion, you save your aha for the end. You gotta kind of flip that a little bit. They don't have time to read sometimes all the way to the end, and so if you save your magical moment that people want to leave with till the very end, if they read half of it, would they get the point? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Okay, and so that's a big piece, but that authenticity over perfection really matters. Students or colleges do not want perfect students. They do not want students who have never struggled, never failed, never had a challenge in their entire life. They want students who work through the struggle, who grow from the struggle, and who can explain how they did that. Okay, so if you have a hard test, or if you have a hard athletic experience, maybe you got injured and had to really overcome something, that's a valuable thing that colleges want to know about you. They want to hear that, okay? And so you might be able to build that into some of your elements of writing. When we get towards the end of this writing process, it is also advised that you get some advice. Okay, that could be from trusted adults, it could be from people like myself and Ms. Django Cohen, it could be from an English teacher. Okay, but that's all gonna be stuff that you really need to kind of be thinking about, but I want you to do it wisely. Parents, I need you to hear this right now. You are not going to college with your student. Okay, and too often you act like it. Okay, you are not their executive assistant. You are not their essay writing AI. Okay, you are someone there as a coach. You are someone there that will help come alongside them to help them navigate. But if you are doing things for your student, I'm just going to say it, you're doing it wrong. Okay, it's super important. It undermines their own self-efficacy about college admissions. And realistically, they're going to leave home. And if you don't go with them, and historically you've done stuff for them, they're going to figure that out real quick when they get to college and have probably a really hard couple first classes. Okay, until they can kind of like figure out how they work with it. So don't get involved in this writing process too early. Stay out of it. Let them get their piece down. Because if you do, guess whose voice comes through? Yours, not the students. Okay, so it's super important to know kind of like where your place in this process is. And for you freshman parents, like you're not really thinking necessarily about college essays yet. There's a developmental way to phase yourself out of this whole thing. And that's freshman parents, you're probably going to be much more involved. Senior parents, more like guide on the side, not sage on the stage. So college lists are something that you can really develop at any time. Most commonly, the college list is starting to be really truly refined, sometimes typically during a junior year. That's usually when we spend the most time kind of like speaking with students about it, but it's also typically when students are most ready to do it. They've had enough life experience in high school. They maybe have spent a little time doing some thinking about maybe what they want to do when they grow up a little bit, setting some initial targets and guides to really answer some of the essential questions of what is the right fit of a school for me, okay? Academic fit, social fit, financial fit, career fit. What are the things that matter to me as a student when I'm looking and developing this list to make sure that I'm gonna be happy at this school and the school will be happy with me? Okay, it's like a job interview. Most of the time we think about, well, will this job hire me? Will this college accept me? People that do job interviews well, though, are also thinking about, is this job the right fit for me as a person? Do they share the same goals? Do they have the same values as I do? Okay, you have to take the same thing in your college admissions process. One of the nice ways, especially if you're a little bit earlier on in this process, and like Ms. Django Cohen said, like if you're traveling, it's a really nice way. Pop up Google Maps, type in the word college, and see what's close by. Spend 30 minutes or an hour. You can join a formal tour, which can be a little bit more informative. But even if they don't have that, maybe they're on break. A lot of times when we're traveling, maybe college is out of session. Most college campuses are open access. You don't have to be a student to go walk around. You can go cruise the campus, see what the campus feels like, get a little bit of a vibe check, and see what it looks, see if it's a initial like, oh, this is kind of cool. I could do this. And then maybe you dig in a little deeper and maybe purposely go back when they have an active tour when you could potentially get some more informational stuff. Okay. When you're there, if you have the chance to talk to someone from the admissions campus, try to come with a couple of questions. Google's great, ChatGPT is awesome, okay? Just literally type in, I'm going to visit UC Santa Cruz. I want to come up with some questions. I'm interested in the engineering program. Spit out 20 questions that would be great for me to ask as a junior student. Right there, boom. Very pointed, very exact questions that might be really helpful for you to get some answers to as you're going through there. You're not always going to get a chance to go into the classroom. Okay, so a lot of times the campus visit is a little bit more of an environmental factor visit. Many times you're not going to sit into a class. You might not get a feel for what a lecture looks like. The campus guide, if you're taking a tour, might give you some information about how classes may be structured or functioning. But generally speaking, you're not going to usually get the behind the scenes look at kind of like being a student there. A lot of times you're going to get a view of the dorms and the dining commons and the workout rooms and things like that, okay? But that's an important factor as well. So financial aid is something that is complicated and usually very important for families. So I'm gonna gloss over a little bit of this today, but I'm gonna put another plug out for, on December 10th, we sent out some information, we'll send out some more information. We are having a financial aid information night, and this is gonna be kind of a two-parter. We're gonna have kind of like this night, like an introduction to financial aid to start off that evening, and then we'll have kind of a deeper dive for those that wanna kind of dive in a little bit more into the specifics. I'm gonna warn you, it's gonna be about an hour and a half or 2 hours of talking about probably pretty dry content. It's like talking about taxes, okay? So it's not super engaging. We'll try to make it fun, and this is probably most geared towards parents rather than students, but students are definitely invited. They'll probably fall asleep though. But generally speaking, financial aid is not usually something that we encourage being the starting point of looking for colleges. So if you're like in 9th and 10th grade or even early junior year, it's important to be aware of, but it's not necessarily I would not yet rule out schools based solely on how expensive they are, okay? You want to have, kind of like investing, you want to have a diverse list of schools. If you apply to all private schools, you're going to get all private school money offers, okay? If you apply to all UCs, that's the only opportunity for financial aid you're going to get back. Okay, so diversifying is not a bad thing when you're developing lists both for admissions but also financial aid. But there's two categories of financial aid. One of them is need-based. That's based on how much or how little you make as a family. Okay, it's pretty cut and dry for the most part. Okay, and the government is usually the organization that tells the colleges through this form, the FAFSA or the California DREAM Act, how much or how little you have. And then the college then builds their financial aid offer. If you want to know more about that, join us on December 10th. But then you also have merit aid, which is where a lot of times you get these extra dollars. So middle or upper income earners, this is probably where the bulk of your financial aid opportunities will come apart from your own, say, savings or opportunities that maybe as a family you've already set up. This is going to be related to things like test scores, if you have academic achievements, and sometimes they're like merit-based thresholds. If you have a 3.5 GPA or higher, maybe it will qualify you for this threshold of a scholarship from this university. They also might have special talent things, so if you're the star quarterback, or if you play the tuba, if you, I don't know what else would be cool, like if you're a pilot and they need a pilot program or something like that, like if you have a distinguishing factor of some type, there might be some merit-based scholarships that would potentially become available to you. That is hard to bank money on because it's a little bit harder to really investigate into. So depending on kind of what that looks like, it would be something to investigate more. So the last piece I'll mention on this slide is this net price calculator. As you start moving towards becoming a senior and really narrowing down and finalizing some lists, plug some numbers through those net price calculators. At that financial aid night, we'll do that together. We will show you how to do that. Like we'll pull it up and actually plug numbers in. Okay, but use consistent numbers. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the financial aid tool, but that gives you a rough starting place. It's kind of like going on to Kelley Blue Book and putting your car in there and being like, how much is it worth? Kind of same idea with their net price calculators. Okay, it won't be the exact thing, but it will get you pretty dang close. There is a process to get qualified for this money though. Okay, and so the FAFSA is the primary tool that most students will complete. This is a federal form that opens up October 1st every year. And then there's different kind of windows of time. In California, the major deadline for that filing is March 2nd every year. So it gives you a long time to file that. It's really, so far this year, it's been pretty simple. It hasn't had a ton of glitches. Don't go back to the news a couple of years ago, it was really horrible. But this year they've cleaned it up. So that opens October 1st. March 2nd is the California deadline, and that's an important one because that qualifies you for some of the California-based programs that are need and merit-based. Things like Cal Grant, middle class scholarship programs, blue and gold scholarship programs from the UCs. Those are different programs. If you don't make that deadline, you throw a lot of money away. Okay. November and February are kind of windows that will be important because some schools have, especially if you go start looking outside of California, they have what they would say priority financial aid deadlines, meaning if your FAFSA is in by this date, you probably qualify for more money. That date is much more variable throughout the senior year. This whole process, I just want to emphasize, is a senior year process. Freshmen, don't go do the FAFSA. It's not for you. So every senior year, and then every year that you're enrolled in college after, you'll be filing the FAFSA as well. Okay, you'll be doing this process. It's an annual thing that you'll just, every October 1st, let's pull out the FAFSA and get it done. Okay? And then the final deadline, if you miss March 2nd, like filed before June 30th, you can still qualify for some funding. The last thing I'll mention on this window is there's a supplementary application called the CSS Profile. We'll talk a little bit more about this at the financial aid night, but this is a supplementary application for about 200 or 250 schools, typically the most expensive and most selective schools, or both. And so this is a program run through the College Board, who also runs AP and the SAT tests. It is a much more in-depth application. Okay, so if the FAFSA is your realtor saying like, I can sell you this house for this much money, this is the home inspector coming and ripping up carpets and checking on the walls for mold and things like that. They're gonna look everywhere for all the different opportunities that you have to fund a very expensive education. The good news is many times it actually opens up more funding resources than reduces. Okay, usually these schools have large endowments and they just wanna make sure that they're giving their endowment money to families who truly need it, and the FAFSA unfortunately doesn't give them information enough to dive into it. So we talked a little bit, I'm gonna give us a little bit of a recap. So we talked about starting early, okay? If you're a 10th grader and you're like, oh shoot, I didn't do that yet, don't worry, just start. Okay, it's not too late to get going. The earlier you can start with some of these processes and start the thought and kind of letting your future marinate a little bit in your brain, usually the better. Okay. Especially early on, that throughout high school, your grades are your primary job. Okay. You could be, there's maybe a few exemplar circumstances that are maybe not the perfect example, but students could be the best athlete, but typically if their grades are not in order, they will not likely go to college. They have to be academically fit and athletically fit. And so those two things go hand in hand. It doesn't mean there's a little bit of sway, but realistically, there's very few circumstances of a 1.0 student getting a full ride to MIT. Okay, so there's very few cases when that's gonna happen. So the other piece is like continuing to build depth, understanding and researching some of the costs related to college. And this, parents, again, this is a more of a initially adult conversation you guys have as a family or a family unit, and talking about what resources do we have? Do we have things set aside? And then as students get older, typically even by the end of their 10th grade year, they should be aware. They should start understanding a little bit about what resources have we set aside? Have we been able to? Do we not? Okay, and just that will help inform their own decision-making process in this list building to some degree, and just being aware of the financial impact of going to college. Deadlines are super important. At Nortel High School, our deadlines tend to be a little bit loose, depending on kind of what it is. The college deadlines are not. Okay, FAFSA college applications, if it says 11:59 p.m., you better ask, is that East Coast or West Coast? Where is the server? Let me think. Okay, because if you're pushing that deadline, if that clock rolls over, there's nothing you can do. They have no empathy, sadly, unless there was like some sort of natural disaster going on. Being authentic, using your resources. We as your counselor are one of the primary resources. Okay, so we welcome questions. We welcome opportunities to meet with students. We do ask that you do a little bit of research. Right, so it's helpful to kind of see what's available, but then if you've kind of done a little digging, like we definitely want to sit down with you. We want to answer some questions and point you in the right direction. Does not mean that we always have an answer. Sometimes we don't know the answer to something. Maybe it's a new question, maybe policies have changed, and so we might say, hey, we need a little time to research. Or we might say, hey, I don't know the answer, but I would probably reach out to this person or call this number or look this up on this website and dig a little deeper and you can probably find it. Okay, so we have a lot of connections. So once again, focusing on strong grade for 9th and 10th graders, interests are important, challenging but appropriate coursework, okay? One of the common questions, especially for 9th graders or even 10th graders going into course requests, are related to, well, should I take this AP class or not? And that's a valid question. You know, sometimes taking 1 is appropriate, sometimes taking 3 might not be. And it might not be because you're not able to be successful in all 3, but maybe not all 3 at the same time. Okay, and so we have to kind of weigh and balance these important decisions as kind of school becomes a little bit harder every year, school becomes a little bit more real, and so do your responsibilities and interest areas. 11th graders, you're gonna take some college visits. We'll think about testing and how that impacts your journey through mainly junior and senior year. We'll start thinking about who we might be appropriately asking for recommendations, again, usually towards the tail end of junior year or the beginning of senior year. There should be a window of no less than 2 weeks for us, more for teachers. Again, they can't shut their door, we can on a pinch. Okay, so plan ahead. Your lack of planning is not necessarily an emergency for your teacher or us, and so it's important. I know that's challenging for students, prefrontal cortex and everything, but it's an important step in terms of like being a professional college applicant. I'm gonna make a plug. I'm gonna leave this up here for a second. Many of you have received some information that we sent out about individual learning plan meetings. So like I said at the beginning, tonight's information is very big picture. We're not digging into necessarily individual student circumstances. Everyone's kind of in a little bit of a different setting and place in terms of where they're at in this journey to applying to college. But we do have individual learning plans offered at each grade level. They happen at different times of the school year. So for example, I just met with all of the seniors and I finished that up about a week ago. Juniors are still having some meetings happening. That's still available to book. We usually wrap those up towards winter break and then be transitioning to the lower classmen for both of our meetings. And so we've just sent out information to families for the sophomore and freshman class, and we will aim to have those meetings available through February. Okay, so it's a meeting that we will meet with just a student if that's what's available. However, we do encourage, especially in 9th and 10th grade, to really have you as the parent to join that meeting if possible, because you're, again, a partner in this process. You know your child really well, and we want to also hear from you of what you've noticed about your son or daughter or person going through high school, and what their strengths are and what their challenges are and things that you've really come to love about your own child. Okay, so we'll ask you a lot of questions about those, but we also dig into 9th and 10th grade a lot of like the academic planning elements, which timely enough usually starts in February for the upcoming school year. Okay, so if you didn't have a chance, we did send out emails. You will probably get more. Please do go ahead and book those whenever you get a chance. The window is broad, so if you're like, I can't really meet until January, you can still get it on the calendar now, and that way the calendar won't fill up later. So I was initially gonna show this, but for the sake of time, we have a couple of meetings following this as well. And just the kind of intricacies of showing this, it's kind of a 15 or 20 minute thing of its own. This tool is called SCORE. Your students have access to it. If you're a junior, good chances in your pathways, you've probably used it already. If you're a 9th or 10th grader, you might just be starting to maybe get exposed to it. But this is a college access and planning tool that we use as a school, and every student has access to it. So when you're looking at what schools would maybe fit me as a student, that maybe have a particular major or are located in a certain place, this tool is really helpful. It's free, it's accessible, and the results are actually fairly good. Okay. There's other tools out there as well. Big Future from College Board is one that usually pops to the top of the list too. But that is a really great resource that the student has access to, and then you as a parent can again come alongside and maybe use some of those same tools and sit with them and kind of research a little bit together, start those conversations. So we're gonna open up the floor for a few minutes of questions, and I'm gonna put a couple of ground rules for us. So like I said, we are talking big picture. If you have a question that you feel like would be appropriate for the entire or most of the group, those are the types of questions that we're going to be hoping to answer today. Okay? The more in-depth or personalized questions would be more appropriate for like your individual learning plan meeting. Okay, so those are where we can actually kind of sit down one-on-one. We can talk about your particular child. So we're going to do that. I do want to just also emphasize that if you scan this, some of you submitted some questions when you guys RSVP. I appreciate that, because what it did is it allows me to actually create this document that basically answers all of those questions. Okay, so I took some time and answered each of those questions a little bit more in depth. And so you can access that, and then kind of additional summaries about kind of the overall picture of what we talked about this evening. Okay, so that's available online. We did record it. I realized it's going to be like this. I did not change the orientation, so you're going to have to go like this to watch it. So that's a bummer. It's still there. And we'll also send out the slide deck and information that we will make available to you. So probably by Friday or early next week, you'll probably get an email from us saying like, thanks for coming, or if you didn't come, please watch this video. And then let me see if we got any, again, general questions. We have maybe about 10 minutes together, and then we'll wrap this up. And there are a couple meetings, just so you know, following this in other areas of the school. So like ski meeting, snowboard meeting, project grad, that's it. So if you're needing at one of those two, you can also skedaddle whenever you need to. Okay, so are there any great questions that you are curious about that maybe we can take a stab at answering? Don't be shy. And I'm going to repeat your question just so that. Yeah, so the main question is dual enrollment in AP. Is there differences? Are they the same? What's the benefits and cons? There is a question on here that goes pretty in depth. Just the short of it is they're relatively similar. They're essentially the same in terms of view and challenge and rigor and kind of like how the colleges evaluate dual enrollment or dual credit and AP level courses. There are a couple benefits and cons of each. The main benefit would be for a dual enrollment class to earn the college level transferable credit. You do not need to take an end of course exam and pass that. The main one for the AP test, to earn the college level credit that would potentially transfer with you, you do have to sit down and perform on a 3-hour test in May. Okay, and so credits are a little bit variable in terms of like who accepts what, in terms of like pass along credit from colleges. Many of our more selective institutions are actually, they don't typically take either for college credit. They're gonna basically wanna teach you everything and charge you for everything along the way. Okay, but generally speaking, they're about equal. Great question. Another question. Yes. So we offer 11th graders SAT opportunity at no cost for SAT school day in the middle of March. I don't have the date off the top of my head. I want to say it's like March 11th or 4th. Yeah, it's the minimum day in March. Whatever date that is, that's when we will have that.
Is there a benefit between ACT and SAT? I know that there was a time that the ACT was higher.
Yeah, so the question was, is there a benefit between ACT and SAT, or a difference or better or worse version of college admissions testing, ACT or SAT? The true answer is who lobbies more, who spends the most money in Washington. But generally speaking, they're able to be taken at face value equally. There's a concordance table that they will statistically align scores between an ACT result and an SAT result. Historically, and I would imagine futurely, students will likely perform better on an SAT-based test for our students, primarily because the majority of our curriculum is related around College Board-centric types of classes, AP classes. We take the PSAT, things like that. Before test optional existed as much as it did now, I would often encourage younger, like early junior year, take an SAT and take an SAT and see, or ACT and an SAT and see which one felt better. There's slight differences. There's some different ways that they ask questions and score things. And so, but realistically now, we usually gear students mainly towards SAT? I don't want to answer all these.
Yeah,
You got-
I think, well, and I also think because we as a school do utilize the College Board and put out the PSAT and run the SAT, we just have more supports in place for students to practice it. And it is difficult to find seats in general because of our location. So students do have to go out of their way to find seats for the ACT versus we are holding it here. And for that reason, more of the students just tend to take it. So,
Yes.
yeah, they run basically very similar. The dates do not overlap, but that could actually be a reason why you might opt for one over the other if there is a test that is conflicting with like an event you have to attend. And you can currently register for the June SAT right now. So we're encouraging students to really think ahead and to potentially register because the seats fill up and you might find that the ACT does have more available dates for you.
Before you register for June, just keep in mind that is graduation. So
Yes.
if you want to be at graduation, don't register for the June SAT. Any other questions? Maybe have time for one or two more. If not, then we'll, like every good professor, release class early. Cool. All right. Thank you all for coming. Like I said, I'll send out slides, video link, just like this. And if you have questions, please do meetings, send us an email. We'll be happy to correspond that way. Thank you for coming. Have a great night.